I first met Jim Mitchell as a fresh-faced grad student from England. I did the master's program at Berkeley in the mid-70s, in the heyday of Mitchell, Seed, Duncan, Goodman, Brekke, an incredible team of huge talent. Funnily enough, I never took a course from Professor Mitchell during that time, so you may wonder what I'm doing here. But there are a couple of good reasons you'll hear in a minute. I started off as a TA, a teaching assistant with Harry Seed, but I think Harry Seed must have given Jim Mitchell a few of my hours because I was also helping Jim Mitchell to do a few jobs, including sorting through a pile of his research papers, not necessarily written by him. He had a collection of research papers on soil behavior and environmental topics, and he asked me to sort them out into different categories. So I was back in my office, probably working in the evening at some time, and it was in a big cardboard box, and I put the box on a garbage can next to my desk just because it was a convenient height. And I started sorting them out into different categories, even though I wasn't quite familiar with his field. When I came back in the morning, the box had gone, and I went down to Jim Mitchell's office and said, "Oh, did you get your box back?" He said, "No." And then when I said I'd put it on top of the garbage can, he said, "Oh my God, the janitor must have taken it and thrown it away." And I remember running through the hallways to the tip where the garbage was all thrown, and we found the box. Boy, I mean, I'd only been there a couple of weeks. I was so relieved that we found it, but it was kind of funny looking back on it, but I was panic-stricken. I did do a little bit of research for Professor Mitchell during the summer of my master's. I took a year and a half to complete. He gave me a project involving consolidation analysis of deep sea sediments. At very cold temperatures, the water was around freezing. And so I had this job of maintaining the reservoir which the experiment was set in at close to zero, which meant every few hours I had to go and get some ice and stick it in this pool. Now in those days, Davis Hall had a freezer room, which was, I don't know what they used it for, but obviously it had a big collection of ice, and I had to get up in the middle of the night. I remember getting there, 3 a.m. to make sure the ice was replenished. And I was absolutely terrified of getting locked in there. I propped the door open and made sure. But that was a project that I'll never forget because of the period of frequency with which I had to replenish this ice. One thing I did do with Professor Mitchell regularly was play squash, and I've heard some other people at this meeting talking about that. Let's say we were very closely matched and had some pretty hard games, and we'd play at lunchtime, sort of once or twice a week. I do remember, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I remember after one of them, we were sitting in the locker room sweating and dripping and feeling awful after, squash is pretty heavy. And I remember Jim Mitchell saying to me, "I don't know if this is good for you, but it just feels better when you die." And I thought, I never forgot that comment. Anyway, while I was still at Berkeley and before I finished my master's, I did a PhD qualifying exam just in case. I had an interest in possible PhD studies, but I did return to England after the master's, and I ended up working for Dames and Moore, who some of the older people in the room will remember. I worked for them in the London office, but I was never in London. I was always overseas. And I remember being in Nairobi, Kenya, on a site investigation job, and a hotel in Nairobi. In those days, it was a telex, was the way people communicated. And I remember the telex clattering away behind the reception desk, and it was a message from Jim Mitchell inviting me to return to Berkeley for a PhD with funding. A great offer. Coincidentally, at the same time, I also had an offer from Manchester University in England to give me a sort of lecturer position, which is a bit like assistant professor. And they said, "Oh, you can do your PhD at the same time." So in the end, as a pivotal moment in life, I jumped into the Manchester job. But I always kept in touch with Jim Mitchell over the years, and when I returned to the United States as a professor at the Colorado School of Mines, I reacquainted myself and we regularly met each other, and he always was a great support for me. And as several people have said at this meeting, he was just a kind person with always a lot of time for people to talk. He wasn't in any way arrogant or aloof. I think that was what I really appreciated. I remember hosting Professor Mitchell in Manchester after he did his Rankine lecture in London, and we enjoyed seeing him up there. Anyhow, I think it's about all I have to say, really. I just am very pleased to be here to pay tribute to the fantastic career of Jim Mitchell, a fantastic engineer, scientist, and a really great person.